Why pay regular price when you can save money on every purchase with WagerBucks at both WagerTalk and Sports Memo? WagerBucks are now eligible for use on not just daily, 3-day, and 7-day passes, but all long-term and seasonal packages up to 1 full year. There are tons of options available for every budget and size of better, from as low as $90 gets $100, all the way up to $3,500 gets you $5,000. Save every day on every pick you buy with WagerBucks.
Welcome, everybody, to Prop It Up. It is Friday, and Friday starts the weekend. We are here to go over all the best stats and information to make your weekend a profitable one in the prop betting world. Let's get started with some fun stats, then I'll bring in my fellow prop masters. Fun stat number one. Since the start of 2019, Derrick Henry has 4,077 rushing yards. No other running back in the NFL in that same time span has even 3,000 rushing yards. Derrick Henry is a king among kings. Fun stat number two, Darnell Mooney, Cordero Patterson, Devontae Parker, and Christian Kirk. What do they all have in common? Well, they all have more receiving yards than DeAndre Hopkins. Not good for fantasy owners for Hopkins there. And last fun stat. This is not fun if you're an Alvin Kamara owner. Taysom Hill has more fantasy football points as a running back than Damian Harris does. And Taysom Hill also has 3 rushing touchdowns. Alvin Kamara has 0. So fun times if you drafted Alvin Kamara early and you get to watch Taysom Hill run in all those touchdowns. All right, joining me, my fellow prop masters. First gentleman is on a 22-11 run on football team totals. Matt Josephs from sportsmemo.com. Matt, how are you this morning? I love your love for Sean Payton. It's truly beautiful. Joining me, this man is on a 60% NFL run since last November. Long-term success in the prop world is always a good thing. Andrew McInnis from WagerTalk.com. Andrew, how are you?
This weekend, and that Derrick Henry one, it's pretty dominant. And I think back to a phone call you and I had last year on a Sunday morning. We were just talking about our props for that day, and you were like, yeah, I think Derrick Henry's going to have a dominant day, and he went over his rushing yards by like 40 or 50 yards. So he continues to have success.
Yeah, we get to see him twice a year here in Indianapolis when he plays the Colts. Fun times. And I'm Andy Lang from WagerTalk.com. 14-5 run on NFL props after a 3-0 run last night, Thursday Night Football. All right, let's get into it. Matt, I'm going to come to you first. First topic, doing your research. So talk to us about what are the different ways we can be best at doing our research when we're looking at these props?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this, last night not last night, but when I was doing my research for Thursday night's game, I was widely assuming that, Jalen Ramsey was traveling with the number 1 wide receiver. That's what he did last year. That's what they did in their system. And I enjoyed last year taking some unders on DK Metcalf outside, I believe, of that playoff game that they had. And DK struggled because Jalen basically followed him everywhere. And I was set to do that. But then I started researching how this year they are using him in a star position, which is basically having him play a lot more in the slot and playing him in different areas where he could be more of a playmaker than a shadow guy. And certainly we saw last night what DK Metcalf was able to do. And certainly there were a bunch of plays where Jalen Ramsey was nowhere near DK Metcalf. He was in some plays. And of course, I think he had the touchdown over Jalen Ramsey, but it pays to do your research because you can't just assume what happened last year is going to happen again this year. The main site I like to go to, there are 2 guys that do a great job on fantasypros.com. There is a primer and there is a projections page there that the guys write these big blurbs, big paragraphs there on fantasypros.com. And I know we talked about it last year, the sites we like to go to get our information. But once again, this year, Fantasy Pros has been very good for me because you could take your fantasy and your DFS information and translate it over to the props. And so that's kind of making sure you do your research and assuming what happened last year doesn't exactly happen again this year.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey is one of those guys that we really want to concentrate on in the secondary. He can be a shutdown corner and be very valuable to prop bettors because we like to take the unders. Marshawn Lattimore has been another one. Matt, are there any other guys off the top of your head that really warrant our attention with that. I mean, Lattimore was great when he was on Mike Evans a couple times. I can't really think of many more really shut down corners anymore. Can you?
Yeah, I don't know if there is. I mean, the Eagles should be using Darius Slay as one of those guys, but they're really not. He's kind of playing out of position a little bit. William Jackson also for Washington. I've talked to a lot of Washington beat reporters and they're not using him properly. I feel like he's a guy that's kind of struggling to learn the new system. He was so good for Cincinnati last year. It'll be interesting to see how Marshawn Lattimore does against Terry McLaurin this year in this game on Sunday, because Terry McLaurin's one of the best wide receivers in football, and Lattimore is probably going to shadow him, literally getting off the bus. So we'll see how that goes on Sunday.
Yeah, that should be a good matchup as well. Andrew, I'm going to come to you. You're going to talk about betting the big name guys. I have a feeling we're going to talk about some inflated numbers here, but when we're looking at props and we get those really, really big name guys that warrant the attention, how do you attack them?
Well, I'm kind of happy, Andy, that you mentioned Derrick Henry off the start, because I was planning on mentioning him, and I kind of told that little mini story about us having that phone call. And I think about that sometimes because, first of all, it's just fun to share our props together. I think it helps, at least me. I like bouncing ideas back and forth. But what I really learned and took away from that phone call you and I had, and you had kind of a laughing tone when you were talking about it, was just like, hey, man, like, I've been riding Derrick Henry's prop, and it's working, and I'm not going to stop. And I think that sometimes we try and overthink things, and we try and find this guy that's deep down in the depth chart that nobody ever talks about, that his prop is 25 yards. And I feel like sometimes, we get a little bit too carried away. And there's guys like DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Henry, like I mentioned, even Nick Chubb for me last year. There's so many guys that you're going to repeat, and find certain situations to use. And I don't think there's a problem with that. So I just wanted to kind of make that clear. Aaron Rodgers passing touchdowns, that's going to be a thing that you want to look at. So when I look at some of these ones that some people might call square, and let's talk about that word square for a second, because one of my least favorite things people talk about is the public side, the sharp side, the pros and Joes. In the prop betting world, it doesn't matter. It's about getting the perfect numbers. It's about finding the right spots and the right situations for that certain player. And they're, going to have success. So I feel like sometimes, as much as I like to come on here or do, videos with WagerTalk, talking about, a guy to get over, 30 yards or over 2.5 receptions. And both you and Matt are very good with finding those unique spots. But I wanted to shine some light on some of these guys that just are having, success week after week. And we don't want to ignore that. But the other thing I wanted to discuss was, Andy, what you just led me into. And that's betting the numbers, not the players, and looking at certain situations. And a big one is passing yards. I mean, you're going to look at some guys and you wouldn't believe, let's talk about Mac Jones for a second. I mean, you wouldn't believe this guy's been throwing the ball. This is a number 2 guy for completions per game on the season so far. You probably wouldn't have thought that would happen. And so Matt talks about doing your research for his segment. And if you're not doing your research, you're not adjusting your thought process. You're not adjusting your opinions. And I'll tell you one thing, guys. I came into this season thinking the Patriots were going to be a huge, running team, always running the ball, not so fast. So I think it's a matter of making sure you're not having an issue with going back on the same guy and having success that way. And I think that you mentioned that long-term success I've had with NFL props, and some of them, Andy, are betting these unique props I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the show, and finding some guys that are down in the depth chart. But some of the success that I've had has simply been picking out my spot. Hey, look, Nick Chubb is going to have a great day today. They're going to run the ball quite a bit. Hey, Derrick Henry is going to have a monster week. I'm going to grab him. And there's nothing wrong with betting big name players, but also don't be afraid to look towards the under on some of these guys, because they're going to get overinflated numbers. And in certain situations, they're not going to just pound that one person to the ground. So I want to make it very clear that there's nothing wrong with, betting some of these big name guys, but also make sure you're not getting a horrible number and just, repeatedly betting it because of their name and who they are.
Good stuff. Andrew, has there been a couple big name guys that you've been gravitating towards? We're only 4 weeks in, but what are some big name guys right off the top of your head that you've been seeing success on?
I mean, DK Metcalf is a guy that I'm looking to target completely. Everybody loves to crap on the Seahawks right now because of their secondary, and I'm seeing a lot of hate towards Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, but we all know DK is going to be there, and a prop that both of you guys have actually got me on is the longest completion, and I always say this, but as the prop world grows, so does the betting market, and you guys actually in the States probably have more availability than I do for some of these unique props. But yeah, like longest catch and stuff like that for DK Metcalf, or yards, stuff like that I'm looking at for him. So that's one of the guys I've been looking at and narrowing in on. And then, like I mentioned, Cooper Kupp, I'm looking at him for his receptions, even Robert Woods as well. Like obviously 2 top guys for LA, but new quarterback there with Stafford. I can really tell he's getting that good relationship and chemistry with them. And that's why I told you last weekend, yeah, I've been more low volume. And I think that it was kind of the same thing as last year where I picked it up I probably, made my most money in props last year in probably the last 5 or 6 weeks. Definitely not the first couple, whereas I feel like that might be different from you guys. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Angie? Like, do you find the same thing, or do you do better out the gate?
Traditionally, I've been much better out of the gate, and it's happening again this year. So my focus is I know year after year I'm going to be great weeks 1 through 6. It's what happens after that. So that's been my real focus, is like, how can I maintain that consistency throughout the year? Obviously NFL's tough. It's probably the toughest sport out there, to make money on consistently week after week. So it's going to be interesting once we get here 2 or 3 weeks out to see how I'm going. Matt, are you normally good right out of the gate? Or are you a second half guy with your props? What do you think?
It depends. I mean, usually the first week we're kind of going off of last year's stuff and some of the preseason stuff. I think as we go along, we try and find our guys like Andrew talked about. I mean, Cordarrelle Patterson last week. I mean, we're not going to get that kind of value anymore. Tony Pollard for you, we're probably not going to get that kind of value anymore. So I think early on it's trying to beat the books and trying to guess, and then afterwards it's trying to adjust to the books adjustment. So yeah, I think it's just kind of it's a fluid thing for me. I get hot and cold depending upon how the games go. If I can predict the game correctly, then my props are going to go well. If I don't, then it's going to be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get one more week out of Tony Pollard. Spoiler. All right, one topic I want to talk about: focusing on one team. Can you find a team that you get a really, really good read on and just ride them? And for me, that team has been the Arizona Cardinals this year. I thought I could have a pretty good read on them coming into this year, and it started with Kyler Murray. So I'm going to use this team as an example and see if this helps everyone out there, if you can find your team. So last year when Kyler Murray got hurt, it just completely derailed the Cardinals season. It was too bad because he was having an unbelievable year. So my prediction was that he was going to run less, and he started off the year running less. And the under was a great way to tackle Kyler Murray's props. But going into the Rams game, I thought that was just going to be a huge game for them. That was a kitchen sink game. They'd run a pretty vanilla offense, and such a big game. I thought, well, Kyler Murray's going to tuck it and run. If there's going to be a game earlier in the season where he's going to throw caution to the wind, this is going to be it. And he did. He ran and got over his total. And so I've been dead on with his props. And because of that, I've been following the team more and more. And once you follow one of these teams, you can really figure out some really good value. Another example of this is their running backs, Chase Edmonds and James Conner. Conner is their unquestioned goal line back. So if you're looking at touchdown props for the Cardinals, you don't need to look at Chase Edmonds. You need to look at James Conner. And when you look at volume of carries, Chase Edmonds has been a really good over if you think they're going to win in terms of rush attempts, because he's going to be the one getting the ball in the fourth quarter as they're trying to run out the clock. And they were pretty open that this was going to be a spread out offense. They signed AJ Green. They got Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore. They got Chase Edmonds. They got James Conner, and they didn't want to rely on one person. And we mentioned DeAndre Hopkins earlier, and this has come to fruition. His unders have been a cash cow, taking unders in receptions and yards. They've been going under. This week, they're going to be getting San Francisco. I don't believe Garoppolo is going to play. They're saying that he's going to test out the calf today. But if they get Trey Lance, that means a rookie quarterback, limited rookie quarterback making its first start. I would expect Arizona to be up again. And I'm going to go right back to Kyler Murray under rushing yards. I don't think this is a game where he's going to need to push it why put yourself in harm's way? So you're coming off a game where he went over his rushing total. I'm going to probably come back and take the under. Probably going to go back to Hopkins under, and I would look at James Conner to score a touchdown. So it's if you can find this one team that you have a really, really good read on, you can stack up a really, really good amount of props for one team over the course of a few weeks. Now, I wouldn't recommend trying this with a bunch of teams, but if you can find that one team that you got a good read on, it can really benefit you. So that's
do you have a limit, Andy, that you'll set for yourself? Do you have a limit that you'll say to yourself, I don't want to do any more than 4 in this game, or
3,
5 my cap, or 3?
3, yeah.
Max?
If a game goes off the rails, and for example, this week, if like, oh, Trey Lance is amazing, they ran a bunch of trick plays, and there was a fumble return for a touchdown. Now all of a sudden it's 21-0 in the second quarter of San Francisco. You don't want to be stuck where you're like, oh my God, I have 6 Arizona Cardinal props and none of them are looking good. Oh my gosh. So I would limit it to 3. But if I am going to pick 3, I'm going to pick Kyler Murray under his rushing. I'm probably going to pick DeAndre Hopkins under his yards, and maybe James Conner to score a touchdown. So it's worked really, really well, but 3 is going to be my limit for any one team on a game. So Matt, let's go to you. That's Matt Josephs on sportsmemo.com. Talk to us about what you got going on for this weekend.
Well, I mean, it's going to be the usual weekend as it feels like. Everything keeps churning along here. Got some baseball plays for tonight. Got one play in every game, and I'm not offering all of them because one of them I got a really good number on. So my all access clients got that late last night, and then of course Saturday full college football with the team totals and all sorts of good stuff with that. We hit both of our Coastal Carolina plays last night, so college football's starting to look up a little bit, and it's the NFL stuff on Sunday. You get your usual teaser, maybe a money line parlay, some props, some sides, some totals, some first quarter unders. So another full weekend is always expected here on sportsmemo.com.
Nice. Andrew, I know you got a nice little promotion going. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, right now, I mean, as you know, Andy, we'd like people to get on for a little bit longer term than just one play or even one day. This is a little bit short term still, but 3 days give you all access, every single sport, not just one sport, for the price of 1 day, using the coupon code YouTube39, 3 days for the price of 39. And it's actually Canadian Thanksgiving this weekend. So we have CFL football, just like you guys have crazy, great games and American Thanksgiving and stuff like that. There's always some great rivalries going on this weekend, some big games on Monday as well. So looking forward to that. My full CFL action can be found over at WagerTalk.com. We've got some UFC and 3-0 start to the postseason so far in MLB, and on a pretty good run, 6-1 leading into the playoffs. So I'm hoping to keep that going and have a good playoffs.
Good stuff. Andrew McInnis from WagerTalk.com. Matt Josephs from SportsMemo.com. I am Andy Lang from WagerTalk.com. We got a 5% NFL play up. Get the 5% now while the numbers are still locked in. Don't wait till Sunday morning. If you know you're going to get it, just get it now and get the best of the numbers. And also the NFL prop pack is up. We're already off to a 3-0 start, 14-5 run on NFL props. They've been a really, really good source of income. And I have 5, believe it or not, guys, 5 first quarter unders. Those have been by far my best props this season, and we got 5 of them locked in already. So go get that. That is on WagerTalk.com. All right, Matt, I'm going to come to you. This is a great segment. Don't tie in too many props to one outcome. Talk to us about that. I love this topic.
Wow, I mean, we literally just talked about it when Andrew asked you the question, so we could have gone to that then. But, I mean, when he asked you how many props you put into one side and correlate things, I mean, look, we're obviously in this business. We get things right. We get things wrong. Case in point, I had pretty much, I think it was 4 props involving the Raiders on Monday, figuring the Raiders were going to hold up their end of the bargain, score some points, move the ball a little bit, things like that. And they didn't do it. And unfortunately, my Monday night didn't go as well. The irony was the only play I hit was the over on Zay Jones's receiving yards, which was a gimmick prop that was found on DraftKings and DraftKings alone. But I mean, look, we're not infallible in this business, and no one really is, for as much as we throw around big time percentages and things like that. Sometimes we see games differently than they actually go. As Andy just said, if all of a sudden the 49ers are up 21-0 and all of his Arizona correlated props with them winning, they suddenly take a different meaning. So if you're going to look at each of these individual games, and of course we talk about it, and the big thing for me is when you do the Super Bowl props, to me, you play out the Super Bowl in your head before you even look at the props. That way it doesn't influence you. But when you play out these games in your head and you decide how, let's say, like the Eagles-Panthers game is going to go, if you think both teams are going to score a lot of points, I try and play some props on both sides. That way, if one team lets you down, you at least have something on the other side. And sadly, on Monday when I had all my Raiders props, it didn't go very well because, of course, the Raiders offense didn't do what I needed it to. So make sure to protect yourself as much as possible by having some props on the other side and maybe having an extraneous prop. Let's say you think it's a high-scoring game. Maybe have an under in there just in case it's not a high-scoring game. So just because you think a game is going to go the way you want it to go, cover yourself a little bit by playing some props just in case it goes in the other direction.
Nice, good stuff from Matt Josephs there. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like we can get yourself into real trouble in the Super Bowl. If there's so many props and there's so many ways to go about attacking the game, and then, it didn't go my way, and I've got 20 props. Dang it. But hopefully, you got some on the coin flip and the national anthem not tied to the game.
Well, Andy, one thing I will say about that, though, is that people will knock somebody for having an extra amount of props on the Super Bowl. But let's be honest, guys, we have more time to prep for that. Everyone's going to think, oh, yeah, he's loading up on the Super Bowl. But it's yeah, I am, because I've been ready for this. I'm I don't think last year I didn't make a play on the side or total in the game. It was just all props. I was just ready for 2 weeks and getting ready. So, it's a really interesting argument. And like Matt said, sometimes you might even want to put something on the under. It's almost like a defense mechanism to be all right, in case my props don't go the way I want them to go, we're going to cash this under. Because it's true, if you have a few guys, if you have a few running backs for a team you think is going to dominate the game and they start getting blown out, that team is not going to run the ball anymore. And all of a sudden your rushing props are down the drain, and it completely, the game script changes.
Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there when the game isn't going our way. And you're like, alrighty. It's terrible. Andrew, I'm going to go to you. Unique props you look at. Unique prop opportunities. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, so to preface this, these aren't going to be unique to Andy and Matt. These are going to be just everyday props for them, but unique to me, guys, these props. So I'll start with one. I mean, I don't really talk about my favorite team too often, but the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers makes a lot of big plays look easy, makes a lot of comebacks look easy. He's used to doing that kind of stuff. And down the middle, these big throws he's been making, the number currently sits at 33.5 for his longest completion. I'll be on that this week in a game that I believe is going to be pretty high scoring, competitive, back and forth game. And Andy and I actually did a video on that this week with WagerTalk. And so 33.5 and longest completion. When you look at those, you have to be looking at games that are going to be shootouts, but also you have to be looking at the game plan and the coach's quotes. A lot of times, even for vets, you're going to have the coaches and the offensive coordinators, even the quarterback, tell you if they're going to be, slinging the ball or if it's going to be, sort of a conservative drive the field type game. They're not going to tell you in those words and use that lingo, but you're going to be able to read between the lines and figure that kind of stuff out. Another prop I wanted to look at was field goal props, over, under either 2.5 or 3.5 field goals. And I want to look at that today for the Bears and Raiders game, and another game that Andy and I spoke about earlier in the week, a game that I think is going to be very boring, really, really sloppy football game, not a fun game to watch. If you like touchdown passes, I wouldn't recommend watching this one, but you can get plus 115 on the over 3.5 field goals in this game. And I feel like both teams will struggle. I feel like there are some injuries for both teams, both offensively and defensively, but I don't see a lot of drives being completed with touchdowns. I see a field goal fest in this one. So looking at over 3.5, and you can get plus money on those as well. Also, longest field goal is one I've seen quite a bit, that I've started to track quite a bit. I know a few people that I follow closely in the sports world that have started looking at those as well with certain guys. I mean, Justin Tucker, if you're betting some of his longest field goal props, you're making some money as well. And also, last but certainly not least, I know that, again, this might not be unique to all of you guys out there, but the sack props. I've mentioned I've been lower volume to start the season off, and I'm going to start picking it up in the next couple of weeks. But watching these sack props, guys, and looking at some teams with offensive lines that are weaker than I might have thought they would be, and quarterbacks that are willing to escape the pocket, and some quarterbacks that just like to go down and don't like to get hit. And be careful, guys, because sometimes you might think a quarterback is mobile, and he might just kind of turtle up and crouch down on the ground and avoid that hit. And if you get two teams that can do that, two great defensive teams, you might be able to cash a sack prop. And as you guys know, people love to bet overs in games. They love to bet over on receiving yards, over on passing yards. But if you think a game might be a little bit boring, that boring game might also stem from some good defense. And hopefully good defense leads to pass rush, which leads to sacks. So just a few props that I've been looking at personally that I haven't always bet in years past.
Good stuff. And shout out to the graphics department there. Unique PROP-ortunities. Early in the morning. Can't put one past those guys. Shout out to the graphics department. All
hey,
right.
Andy, I'll say this. As a guy yesterday, I was the only one in America maybe who was cheering that Matt Gay field goal at the end of the game because I needed that for my points prop. People were like, what are you cheering for? Why do you care about this random field goal? And I'm like, yeah, I got Matt Gay's points prop, and that thing put me over. So I was really happy by that thing.
Right. I meant to bring that up, Matt. You bet that a lot last year, didn't you, Matt? The single field goal.
Yeah, because as you said, there are certain defenses that give up a lot of field goals. I saw Seattle allowed 2 field goals per game this year, and I feel like Seattle's defense is sneaky enough that in the red zone they can do better, and Matt Gay had gone over that number every time, and so I took a shot on it, and of course I was mad he missed the extra point, but I mean, look, he made the field goal when it mattered, and so I was happy when it seemed like all of America was mad last night.
I was happy. I was happy. By the way, shout out. I didn't know anybody else was on the Zay Jones prop last week. That was amazing. That prop opened at 4.5 yards and it went down to half a yard, and he gets one catch for 5 yards. Cash it.
You guys ever have people ask you like what your thoughts are in a game or what you're looking at betting, and you tell them a prop and they're like, no, like seriously, like what's your bet? I get that all the time these days.
All the time.
Especially because people know I'm betting props. And like a lot of my dad's buddies are really, really good, like really big sports guys. And they started betting on sports, especially with the legalization. They're like, hey, like I moved away from my hometown. So they're shooting me a text and they're like, hey, what's the big bet tonight's Thursday night football game? I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's going to, rush a lot, big rushing yards. He's like, no, but like, what's the bet? Like, who's going to win? I'm like, that's my bet. That's where my money is, And I find it so interesting because all of us, the three of us, find so many different unique props each week. And it doesn't mean we're going to have a bet on the game. And that's why I found your segment interesting, Andy, about, picking one team. Because sometimes I find if I have a bet on the side, I will load up on props. And sometimes it's the opposite. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to cheer on that side. But I just wanted to see if you guys get that too, because I literally got that last night. And I was like, guys, I'm not even betting the game.
It happens to me all the time. I had, we had 3 bets last night. We had Stafford under his completions, and to correlate, we had Darrell Henderson over his rushing yards. So it was like every time Stafford, would throw the ball, like, come on, run it. What is it? 3rd and 9, run the ball.
Yeah.
But yeah, like some people are like, who do you like tonight? Like, I like Stafford to not throw it a lot. So I get it. All right, last segment, we're going to get to our best bets. I want to talk about deceiving stats. Can stats be deceiving? And this is kind of the next level of research. And I want to use the Kansas City Chiefs rush defense. So at first glance, you would say, well, the Chiefs, they're a horrible rush defense. So I'm going to take the other team's running backs over. Well, the next level is looking at the numbers and are they lying to us? So the Chiefs are the 3rd worst rush defense. Is the stat deceiving? And I would say a little bit. So they have faced Cleveland, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and the Chargers. Browns, number 1 rush offense. Baltimore is the number 3 rush offense. Philadelphia, believe it or not, number 9 rush offense, and the Chargers are the number 16. So they faced 4 rushing offenses in the top half of the league, including 2 of the top 3. And you could say, well, maybe those numbers are inflated because they played the Chiefs. I would say, no, we got a 4-game sample size. These are teams that are running the ball on everybody, that they play. So the Chiefs are not going to be playing, the top 3 rushing offenses every week. So I think the stats against them may be a little bit inflated. So moving forward, when we're looking at the opposing team's running backs, it would be very easy to just, blanket the other team's running back and say, I'm going to take the over because the Chiefs can't stop anybody. I would say you're going to get a few yards value on the under. So when we move kind of later on in the season, take a look at this Chiefs rush defense and see if these numbers don't start coming down a little bit. And instead of being the 3rd worst rush defense, maybe they start to get down to the 25th, the 22nd, as they're playing lesser quality rushing offenses. So don't be fooled by some of these team stats. Make sure you know why the team stats look like the way they are. And vice versa, if you've got a team that is amazing against the run, well, who have they played? Have they played bad rushing offenses? So just take a look at some of these team stats and make sure you're not getting deceived by them. So, all right, it is time to get to our best bets. Matt, I'm going to go to you first. What is your best bet going into Week 5 NFL this weekend?
All right, I can't believe I'm doing this because I didn't. It's the guy.
Yeah.
Last week I played Cordarrelle Patterson, and this week I'm going to Lombardi Lenny. I'm going to Leonard Fournette and his over on his rushing yards. Now I'll caution you now. It's only available on FanDuel, so I would run there now because I think you're going to get a good number here, and I think the other books will eventually put it up maybe today or tomorrow. But over 58.5 rushing yards. If you look at Miami so far this season, Damian Harris ran for 100 yards. We've seen, I don't even know if Damian Harris has run for 100 yards since then. We saw Devin Singletary, 82 yards on 13 carries. Peyton Barber, 23 carries, 111 yards. And last week, Jonathan Taylor, 16 carries for 103 yards. And teams are committing to run the ball against Miami, mostly because they have, one of the best cornerback duos in the country. We know Tampa Bay loves Leonard Fournette. We know Leonard Fournette is able to, do some things in the backfield here. And he's the preferred guy over Ronald Jones. So I think that there's some value here on Leonard Fournette's over on his rushing yards. Maybe you want to take a look at his touchdown prop. He does not have a touchdown yet. Ronald Jones stole that touchdown from him last week. So maybe you want to look at it, although the first price I saw was minus 130. And I usually don't like taking minuses when it comes to touchdowns, especially from a guy who doesn't have any touchdowns yet. So I would say run to FanDuel and take the over 58.5 rushing yards for Leonard Fournette. Miami's rush defense is absolutely abysmal. And we know Tampa Bay is going to commit to the run.
A great call. Damian Harris has 72 yards besides that 100-yard performance. So, Matt, you're absolutely right. And, boy, that Ronald Jones touchdown last week, that was the ultimate, oh, of course Ronald Jones gets the touchdown, helping absolutely nobody in the prop world. All those stars on Tampa, and Ronald Jones gets it. Andrew, I'm coming to you. What's your best bet for Week 5?
I'm taking a look at a game, and you guys, we talked about it so far today on the prop show about a game script going your way. And this is simply because it's first of all, big game, Browns and Chargers. But I believe the game script for the Browns is going to be, possession based. They want to control the run game. They're the number 1 team in rushing attempts per game, rushing yards per game, like Andy mentioned earlier. And the Chargers 4th worst as far as rushing yards allowed per game. Looking at Kareem Hunt, over 45.5 rushing yards on this game. He has cashed this in 3 or 4 weeks so far. And that 1 week he didn't cash it was against the Chiefs, a team, as you know, you have to throw the ball a lot against, a team that can score a lot of points. And, the Chargers are talented as well, obviously, as we know. But I just believe the game plan for this Browns team is going to be to run the ball down their throat. We know they have that great 1-2 punch at the running back position. And possession will be a huge thing in this ball game. I believe this number is far too low, guys. Over 45.5, Kareem Hunt.
I'm going to make it 3 for 3 on running backs and overs. I'm going to take Alvin Kamara over 82.5 yards rushing. Kamara has just been non-existent in the passing game. He got 0 targets last week for 0 catches, obviously, but he's been great in the running game, and I'm going to take him to continue that momentum this week. He's gone over this total in 3 out of 4 games this season. And now that Tony Jones is out of the backfield, this backfield is 100% his. He's gotten 24 and 26 carries the last 2 weeks. Playing Washington, they've been a disappointment on defense this season. They've given up over 118 yards a game rushing. So even if they want to key in on Kamara, they haven't really shown me much that shows they can key in on one guy and stop him. It's hard to see a game script where New Orleans is going to abandon the run completely. I think Kamara gets over this 20 carry threshold, and he should get enough rushes to get over this total. So I'll take Alvin Kamara over 82.5 yards rushing. And if you really want to play more on Kamara, sprinkle the under on his receptions or receiving yards. That's been a cash cow as well. So, all right, that is it for Propping Up. My fellow prop masters, Andrew McInnis, everything can be found on WagerTalk.com. Matt Josephs on SportsMemo.com. I am Andy Lang from WagerTalk.com. Good luck this weekend. Hope everyone has a profitable one, and we will see you next week on Prop It Up.